This is a More Than Just Podcast production.
Welcome to Spotcast. It's the Christmas special. Woohoo! Okay, wait, no, it's not Christmas anymore. It's the January, not even the Ides of January anymore.
It's the Blue Monday special.
It's the 2024 special. No, the Blue Monday special?
Yeah.
Is it Monday?
This Monday coming up is the Blue Monday special.
Oh, it's the Blue Monday special. My name is Tim Mitchell. I am in Toronto, Ontario, and I am joined by Jonathan Kuline in Mississauga, Ontario.
Hello there, Blue Monday kids.
And we also have Hyman Lopez Jr. in Seattle, Washington. We're not sure what time zone or date it is over there because he's far away.
How's it going?
Mr. Consistency.
Going good. Going well. Alrighty. Well, we'll start off with some fact check, and it's kind of silly because, this is how long it's been since we've actually done. I forget, was it November we did our last episode? I can't remember.
Yeah.
All right. So Ed McVeigh, it says here in the notes, Ed McVeigh and Meg Bellamy will play Will and Kate in The Crown season 6, which I just finished. So that's why I say it's silly. It was a two-parter. Like they did, I think they did 4 episodes of the first season, which were about Princess Di and the demise of her, and then they only did a couple of episodes really about Will and Kate, as they're been known to be called, and they kind of did a nice little send off with the various actresses who played the Queen, sort of talking to herself as you know, and then sort of talking and a little bit about the fact that the Queen herself actually chose the Piper song that the Piper played at her funeral. So it was kind of an interesting wrap up to the thing. It's funny. I kind of like, it's very speculative whether it's what fic lit they call it, right? It's like historical. It's like historical, but it's like they make it up because I can't imagine these people having these conversations in real life, you know. So anyway, that's it. The Crown is done. If you haven't seen it, we got 6 seasons to binge. No, you guys are just chomping at the bit to do that. And we'll jump over to the headlines where Jonathan's going to take us into S5.
Yeah, so we'll start with some Star Trek, since this is a Star Trek podcast, sort of. And we know that the 5th season of Star Trek Discovery is coming up this year, the 5th and final season. We got news recently that we are going to get a little sneak preview, especially if you happen to be from Jaime's home state of Texas. So the South by Southwest Film and TV Festival is going to be the debuting place for the Star Trek Discovery Season 5 premiere. So if you happen to be in the Austin area between March 8th and 16th, you can check out about a month in advance what the first episode of Star Trek Discovery has to offer. So not going to do me any good. Won't be in Austin around then, but Jaime? Trip to Austin?
I actually will be in Washington, D.C. for a work conference that week, so I won't be in Austin, Texas. I guess I'll have to be scouring the interwebs. A
connecting flight or something? Or
what's that?
You were going to be our boots on the ground.
I can't this year. Maybe next year. Oh, wait. It's the last season.
Maybe next time Discovery's on. Yeah, that'll
exactly.
be good. Yeah.
Season 6. Now we start lobbying for a season 6 so Jaime can make it.
Start writing today, folks. Yep. All right.
Next up, so we had the Emmy Awards this week. The awards honoring the greatest in television, unless you're a fan of sci-fi or fantasy, in which case you can go away. We did get some award wins on the technical side. Last of Us won 8 different technical Emmys, but unfortunately, we got 0. That is 0. Did I mention 0? Wins for any genre stuff. There was not one. This includes The Last of Us, that was nominated for 24, that it won 0 of the major awards. Not Best Show, not Best Actor, not Best Actress, none of that. They did get a couple of smaller awards for guest starring roles for Storm Reed and Nick Offerman, so that was nice. Nick Offerman, that episode I think we talked about at the time, was just brilliant on that show, so that's nice. But yeah, like, this was a great, and we'll talk about it later in this episode, when we get into the nominees for the 2024 Spockies, this was a great year for genre television. There was some really transcendent performances. There were some really great moments. There were some great shows, shows like The Last of Us and Andor and, Wednesday, and we had lots of great material. House of
Yellow
Dragon.
Jackets,
yeah, like great stuff. And to come away with a bunch of people got nominated, but they got crushed by the inevitable bulldozer that is Succession and The Bear, was just a little. I don't know.
Well, the Bear, admittedly, I was a huge fan of The Bear right from the get-go. But then again, I was in hospitality services at the beginning of my working life, right? So,
I mean, I'm not disputing the quality of those shows. What I'm saying is that I'm sure that all the performers there and all the writing and all the directing and everything else, all those things are wonderful. However,
there's not a single lightsaber or blaster anywhere.
Yeah, it just seems a little bit like, once again, we're ghettoizing ourselves in this part where it's like, but these are as worthy as anything else that got nominated. And it's unfortunate.
The other thing too, we had the Globes. Wasn't the Globes just like last week as well?
The Golden Globes were a couple of weeks before, or a week before, I guess. But I have a tough time. I have a tough time considering those a legitimate thing, because they are just the process of choosing those is not exactly above board. So
not science. Okay.
Yeah. But we will get some interesting questions answered, because the Oscar nominations will be coming out on Tuesday. So when next we speak, we will have some discussions about what has been nominated on that front. Maybe we will see a little more love for genre stuff. Although when you look at our Spockies list, you might not see that. Anyways, but I digress.
Yeah, I think rounding out the trifecta of powerhouses. So you already mentioned Succession, which had its final season. The Bear, which I think got a lot more recognition this season than it did, kind of slightly overlooked in its first season. And Beef, so Netflix's Beef, starring Ali Wong and Steven Yeun. Those were just like the powerhouse ones that, seeing back to back from the Emmys and the Golden Globes and Critics' Choice, all in sort of rapid sequence, made it pretty clear like who was gonna win, because you saw what happened in the first one. I think there's sometimes in the film and TV industry this weird thing where it's like everybody gloms onto this one thing and that's all they can think about. So if you just are unlucky to produce awesome television like The Last of Us, you're just going to straight up get ignored, because somebody has already decided, oh, this is the thing. This is what we're going to go. This is going to get like all the awards, some of which, to be honest, they may not even necessarily deserve, but it's like, oh, who's the actor, actress, or writer, director, producer, whatever, right? Like it goes way deep of like, oh, that's the one. It's from the one that's supposed to win everything. So this is therefore the one that wins. So it becomes this weird self-fulfilling prophecy. I've never been a fan of that, which is why when we get to our Spockies, the people's, the real People's Choice Awards, I actually had a really difficult time with ours. I was like, man, I don't know who to choose on these. So I'm sure we'll get to some of that discussion.
Yep.
And the envelope, please.
Mm-hmm. Right. This one I threw in here because of my beloved co-host Tim. So they were announcing more content coming for the delightful Apple Vision Pro this week, and announced a pretty impressive lineup of content to kick things off, including a pretty deep bench of 3D movies to try out on this gadget. Tim, you can tell me whether or not you think this is going to be the place for this kind of content. But yeah, 150 movies in 3D coming to Apple Vision Pro at launch, including Avatar: The Way of Water, Dune, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Super Mario Brothers movie, Avengers Endgame, Force Awakens, Elemental, Encanto. This is a lot of good stuff. And they also announced that they're throwing in there, you're going to be able to get your Disney Plus, your Amazon Prime Video, and like it's not a crappy way to kick things off.
True, and I've got a couple of apps that I've published already as well to get this out and going. in case you didn't know, I've been writing tutorials and articles and stuff on the Vision Pro, having tried it out in August. That's all I can say about it. But I did a talk at a meetup yesterday on it. I having seen it, I totally could see this being a really cool changing thing for watching this kind of content. I mean, I had seen that Dune was coming out, and I guess the first Dune, and I hadn't seen the other ones too. But yeah, Spider-Verse, Way of the Water. Watching a game again would be kind of cool. And I'm a fan of The Force Awakens. I'm sorry, I hate to say it, but I get because I get the sort of the feels that I got watching it as a kid. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the 3D content that's going to come out. And Disney has said since day one. I mean, they were on the podium when Apple announced the product. I think I forget who it was. Jaime, the CEO or whatever. Somebody was there talking about how they're all in on this product, and this is only one small part of what the Vision Pro is going to offer for people. But yeah, the Vision 3D videos is going to be something pretty cool. And that's not the only reason to buy it. Obviously, there's many reasons to buy this spatial computer.
Yeah, briefly, because I guess this does sort of bleed into more than just code sort of content that overlap. So notable exceptions to the list of apps that will be available on the launch of the Apple Vision Pro are Netflix and YouTube, which have both said that they're not planning to support on day one. So Disney and Apple TV Plus will benefit, I believe, quite immensely from that. Will it be enough? I don't know. It's a $3,500 device, so it's not going to sell like hotcakes, right? Even if they sell out, there's only so many they can
supply.
make.
That's the other side of it,
right?
It's not just the price. It's also going to be there's a hardware limitation and ordering limitation.
So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens here. Like, I don't necessarily fault the streaming providers for not supporting on day one, and some might want to see what happens, and some are a little bit more bold. I don't know that it's something that couldn't be overcome. Literally, all you have to do is hit up Tim on the Twitter machine and hire him to make your damn app. and you too, Netflix and Paramount Plus and etc. Like you too could have a Vision Pro app on day one. So hurry up.
Well, also, I mean, to add to the sort of the drive to get 3D content out there, we do know that the competitors are making devices, and in fact, Sony announced a visual, like a mixed media headset, I guess we should call it, XR, at CES just recently, right? So that's kind of cool. They didn't win the show. The show was won by the little Rabbit One thing, I think, right? Or there's a couple of other things that came out of that, but. No, it's cool. I definitely think that my impression of the Vision Pro is it's. I mean, that's why I'm basically invested in a lot of my energies into it. Is I think it is definitely a future product, and it'd be interesting to see where it goes. It's if you believe the rumors, it's going to be a slow launch. But then again, the iPhone was a slow launch. The iPad was a slow launch. It took a couple of years for people to figure it out. But if you look at the iPhone as an analogy, it's one of the points I make in my talk is Uber, DoorDash, Airbnb, Twitter, even pumpkin spice lattes didn't exist before the iPhone came out, right? So. There's a lot of businesses that came out just because you can now carry the internet in your hand, right? And so
for folks who are maybe
Pro was
shaking their fist at my statement, let me clarify my statement. So when I say it's not going to sell like hotcakes, it's like hotcakes are delicious and inexpensive, easy to make, right? This will sell like Supreme hats, very expensive, relatively few of them, but will, I believe, completely sell out. So. Just to clarify there.
Apple's got some high ticket items. They got the big display, the $3,000-$4,000 display that competes with $30,000 monitors for vision. They've got the $2,500 Mac Mini on steroids, which they call the Mac Studio, right? And then they've got all the laptops and stuff. So I mean, you're not. If it's got an app, if it's shiny and got an Apple on it, you're going to pay for it. You're going to pay. It's always been the truth. Apple puts a lot of energy into their products and polish, right? And even with the AirPods Max, we were talking about those yesterday. The headphones. I mean, like most people are walking around with earbuds, but there's a whole whack of people walking around with nice Beats headphones, and people aren't afraid to spend money on stuff that's got an Apple logo or Apple associated with it. So I to be honest with you, without saying too much, I definitely think there is value in the product, and it'd be interesting to see what happens with version 2 and when the SE version comes out, and it's going to get smaller and smaller and better over the years, right? So
yeah,
this is just the beginning.
Well, and the nice thing is with a company like Apple, they've got the legs that they can prop it up for as long as they need to, right? It's not like they need it to perform. They've still got other revenue sources, and they can continue to invest in a way that other
services,
companies can't.
We've been talking about this on More Than Just Code for a couple of years now, that we've been watching the services come out of Apple, like the iClouds and the all the sort of online service, Apple TV, Fitness Plus, news. We've been watching those things come up, and the numbers. If you look at we talk about the what do you call it? What is it? The reports. What's the thing that Tim Cook stockholder reports? What's that called, honey?
Like quarterly reports, perhaps.
Yeah, quarterly reports. That's what I'm looking for. The mix of products has. The iPhone obviously is the clear leader in terms of where revenue comes from, and then the iPad and the Macs kind of share a little bit of that. And then the wearable stuff, the watches. But that number of, we've been watching the services number grow from 2%, to 10%, to almost 15% of Apple's revenue, and it just grows. We joke about Apple buying Disney all the time because it's something that could possibly happen, right? Especially with latest news of Disney not really making money from streaming, right? So I think, and we've been watching Apple come out with technologies that we the three of us on More Than Just Code have been scratching our heads about, Stage Manager and all this AR and VR stuff that they've been coming out with, and then only to find out that they were all driving towards a Vision Pro with this, right? And Vision OS, which is it's a flavor of iOS that only runs on the Vision Pro device, right? And like I said, just beginning. We'll see where it goes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I must say the one thing that caught my eye in here was the some of the sports apps that are coming with it is the ESPN Plus, NBA, MLB, PGA Tour, things like that. That could be a real difference maker as well, as you say, if they don't have things like Netflix, but they can offer, the live sporting event, feel like you're in the arena kind of experiences and stuff. That could be an interesting development for them as well.
The demo they did to reporters and the demo that people who were at WWDC got to try. A few developer friends of mine tried it too. You got to sit courtside, right?
Oh.
At a basketball game, like an NBA game. And you got to, a dinosaur walks into the room and comes up and sniffs against the side of your head kind of thing. And you hold out your finger and a butterfly lands on your finger. That kind of what experience, it's kind of I can, why watch the Oscars on TV when you can sit, next to Mama on, Anthony, what's his name's mother, and watch the show. Somebody's going to be sitting there with a 3D camera rig or some type, and you'll be live streaming to your Vision Pro, right? So
cool.
That's just a guess of what could happen, right?
Yep. Start saving your pennies, kids.
Yeah. Go see U2 at the big Sphere in Vegas, because I don't know if you guys saw the over the summer. Was it summer, or I guess over last fall? People posting videos on YouTube of themselves at the Sphere thing, the U2 concert.
Yep.
Actually, there was a little special he put on Apple TV Plus. I don't know if you guys saw that, but where they talked about the dome and stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty neat.
Yeah, future's cool. So it's kind of like the Sphere, but on your head instead of
mini sphere, immersive sphere,
your personal sphere.
The next thing I've got up is this is an interesting one because we always talk about when is the right time to go have a pee break in a movie. We talk about what's the right amount of liquid to take with you. Well, here's your next challenge, guys. The Dune Part 2, which is coming out this spring, has announced a colossal runtime of 2 hours and 45 minutes. That is 10 minutes longer than Part 1 was. This is now creeping closer to the Lord of the Rings model of film watching experience. But plan accordingly. If you have a weak bladder, it's coming on March 15th. If you just maybe plan ahead, think about when might be some good times to step out. But this is a long one. This is and I'm not complaining. I think I would watch 3 hours of anything Denis Villeneuve made. But still.
Well, while we were away, I went and watched the Napoleon movie in the theater. That is 2 hours and 40 minutes or whatever I think it was. I did a lot of dry land training and running, running sprints and not eating for a week kind of stuff, and not wearing a diaper, and I got myself ready for that show, and it was an interesting movie, but apparently like we're still looking forward to the 4-hour cut or something like that is coming to Apple TV later.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
But I mean, it's funny because even like the Snyder Cut, I think we talked about this before, and I watched that in 3 sittings. I didn't sit all the way through it, right? So watched it and went and had a life, and then came back and watched a little bit more of it, right? But yeah, it's I don't know, it's interesting. I can't remember was it when we saw it. Was the theater full? I can't remember. Did we go on an odd night or something?
I think we waited a little bit. I don't think it was packed. I must admit, I'm trying to reflect on what that experience was like, but I don't remember it being jam packed.
Right.
I mean, when we went to see the Spider-Man movie last year, that was packed.
Yeah, it was full. Yeah. Well, I mean, the when I saw Napoleon at a matinee. I guess it was like an afternoon. I had a doctor's appointment downtown, so since I was down there anyway, I just went down and watched it, and it was pre-puppy, so obviously I could sort of excuse myself for the afternoon, but not so much anymore, unless I take the puppy with me. But do they have puppy shows? Like, can you bring your puppy to the movie theater?
I don't know. That's a good one.
But yeah, let's try and keep them away from everybody else's popcorn.
Yeah, it's the problem. They're gonna lick the floor clean.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see. I don't know. I mean, I guess it has to be as long as the book.
Oh,
I mean, it is a spectacle. It's bigger. The movie's bigger than I mean, I read the book a few years ago, like just not that long ago, because I never got around to reading it until like recently. But in my mind, I did recognize the families and all that kind of stuff, but I never really got Denis Villeneuve really makes the scale immense, right?
Yeah,
especially the worms compared to who was the guy who did the one in the 80s, 90s?
David Lynch.
With Sting in it. David Lynch.
Yeah.
The worms in that were kind of like, oh, look, it's worm. Tremors was more scary than the worms. And
well, bit by bit, generation by generation.
Yeah, the 245 is probably a good length. It's a longer movie, but the title of like epic runtime. This is a visual medium. I think you'd have Killers of the Flower Moon and Zack Snyder's Justice League with like, you got to pump those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers. Matthew McConaughey. I mean, 3 hours, 26 minutes, 4 hours, 2 minutes for Killers of the Flower Moon and Zack Snyder's Justice League. So 245, I think is.
I wonder if they'll do back-to-back IMAX screenings of the first and the second one, right? So the Dune. I mean.
There is actually, I did see this week that I think it was next week, they're bringing Dune back to IMAX for people who want to soak it in one more time before the next one comes out. It seemed a little soon. I would have preferred it was a little closer, but there must be other priorities for the IMAX theaters closer to the date. But yeah, I was thinking actually, oh, that's kind of cool if you want to go back and rewatch.
Or you can watch it on your Vision Pro. We just talked about that, right?
Yes, that is definitely cheaper than going to pay for an IMAX ticket.
Yeah, if you can only watch it one at a time.
Yeah, that too.
All right. Well, actually, no, you can do the share play thing. Like, you could sit there and watch it on your phone. Hype can watch it on his iPad, and I can watch it on my Vision Pro, and we'll like, have a conversation as we're doing it, or not.
That sounds immersive.
Mm-hmm. Right.
All right.
What else is going on with the Star Wars world?
Star Wars. Well, we got another movie announcement. Now we knew that we were going to get something from Dave Filoni, but it seemed like where it was headed was sort of the culmination of the Mandalorian / Ahsoka / Skeleton Crew / Book of Boba Fett / whatever universe. And it turns out what we're getting is the Mandalorian and Grogu movie. Apparently it's going to be called The Mandalorian and Grogu. And it's going into production this year, and the expectation is it will be out next year. So this is interesting because they also announced that they're going to definitely do Ahsoka season 2. I think obviously if anyone's watched that, you understand why they need to do a season 2 of that. So yeah, I guess the question is timing. Is this movie the culmination of all that storyline, or is it just part of that story? Is this just a way to cash in at theaters for something that's doing really well on Disney Plus? It's funny because we always talk about Disney Plus being used to augment what's happening in the movies. Here we're getting an example of something that's done well on Disney Plus, and now they're trying to drive people back to the theaters. So interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just a point on Ahsoka. She never should have gone for that 3-hour cruise, right?
Yeah, really.
I think for me, the things that kind of come to mind, one, people will say, why? And it's like, well, let me just use an anecdote. So every year when I visit my family for the holidays, my mother will ask me, like, because she knows I'm into this stuff. She's like, hey, is there going to be a new Star Wars movie? I'm like, not this year, Mom, not this year. And now this news is a little late, but I'll have something for, the coming holiday season, 11 months from now.
Wait, she doesn't listen to the podcast?
She's not a podcast listener, but even if she was, she's still going to go through a list of like, is there going to be a new Star Wars? Is there going to be a new Harry Potter? Is there going to be a new Jurassic Park? Like, those are the major films series that she thinks about. So if you're Disney, you're probably looking at stats that are a lot more, scientific than the anecdote I just provided. But we haven't had a Star Wars film in theaters for a while. And this is a property that people really love and enjoy. You have no idea how many chia commercials I watched where they got like 3 different models of Grogu that you can grow the chia seeds on. This is a very marketable property, and my hope is that they don't get greedy with like, oh, you have to watch the show to understand the movie. I think it should certainly be better for those of us who enjoy, but there should be enough there for people to hang their hat on. And I also hope that they don't make it like, oh, you had to watch the movie, otherwise you won't understand the next season. Like, I think there's a careful blend here where this is a nice one-off movie, shows their adventures. They clearly have a lot of adventures. We don't necessarily see all of them. That is, enhanced by the fact that you've been watching the show. And if you watch the movie, the show should be somewhat enhanced. But I don't want it to be like you had to catch up on your homework sort of thing. Like that, I think will just hurt people. Like, it needs to have a definitive start, a definitive satisfying end that is tied into their overall, like, they go on adventures sort of story.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how they play this out. I mean, I think the Mandalorian part of the Mandalorian, mostly, we'll say the first 2 seasons were stronger than the third, but I'm curious to see how this all ties together and where they're going with it all. So yeah, I think you're right, Jaime. I think it is time that going to see a Star Wars movie in the theater is a special occasion again. And taking this little break that they've taken and building a little bit, getting us excited about different parts of this universe and not just continually going back to the Skywalker saga, I think is cool.
Wait for it. No, we'll come back to that in a minute.
Are you fishing for sound effects? What are you doing?
No, just hold that thought. You just put a pin in it for now. We'll come back to it.
All right. All right. Fine. Be that way.
Sorry, you were just talking about the Star Wars. I broke your train of thought, did I?
No, that's okay. Okay, one last thing from me. So we got news this week from an interview with Tatiana Maslany, the star of She-Hulk. She was being interviewed for a podcast, and she said, she was being on a Twitch game show, and she said she does not think that She-Hulk will get a second season. She said, quote, "I think we blew our budget," and Disney was like, quote, "No thanks." So,
really?
Yeah, a bit disappointing. I mean, it probably stands alone. I think I'd be happy if they just could mix that character into some of the future sort of crossover-y movie things that they're going to do, or have her pop in as a guest star. She-Hulk, it's funny how, as they continue to expand into I'm, take this as you will, but the B level of some of the Marvel universes, which is where they're going right now. They did trot out the big ones, and they are going to have big ones again when they start reintroducing Fantastic Four and X-Men and everything else. She-Hulk's always been a secondary character. She was, she's had her own book. It's kind of come and gone over the years. There's been long stretches where there wasn't a She-Hulk book. She's not a top-line character, and that's fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think having, 1 or 2 seasons and not more on some of these shows is a bad thing. And we'll get into that when we talk a little bit about Echo and some of the other Marvel stuff. But yeah, I think that series was fun. It was funny. It had a certain charm. She was very good. I thought the woman who played her as She-Hulk was very good. I didn't have a problem with it, but I also don't have a problem with it only being one and done.
Yeah. True. But she was also in What If, right? Recently?
Was she in What If?
I don't remember She-Hulk. Did I miss She-Hulk?
I don't remember She-Hulk either.
She was. Okay. I just saw Green Lady. I thought.
I mean, it's entirely.
No, I think it was Gamora. There was a Gamora episode.
Yeah, there definitely was.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. I think maybe you were finding the green.
What was the one with
Do all
Captain...
green people look alike to you, Tim?
No, the Captain America episode with her and Black Widow, right? Wasn't there a whole slew of women heroes in that one, in the back scenes and stuff?
So this is the challenge with What If, that it has the Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse problem of if you just said a random character, I'd be like, well, I don't remember seeing them, but they could have been in the background. There's just a lot of fan service and Where's Waldo stuff. So Tim, there could very well have been a She-Hulk that was intended to be this one somewhere in some of those large group scenes, but I don't remember the character being a driving factor.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. But
is this me now?
It's a good one to put in a future What If, right? It's probably a lot cheaper than
in the same way that they bring back. I thought, we'll talk about What If in a bit, but I think they are a great place to bring back old characters they've established already, and the voice actors seem to come back. Elizabeth Olsen came back for the season. I think there's a great opportunity to do fun stuff with that character.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I put on here. I read a book last year. People at work were telling me about this 3-body problem, and I read it and thought it was really good. And then I think we talked about it coming to Netflix. And I think actually I posted this story in November. That's how long it's been since we've actually done an episode about the release date. But you posted the trailer last week in our Slack, right, Jonathan?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll put that in the show notes here, and I assume you guys have seen it. I was telling Jonathan, I gave him a copy of the book for his 50th birthday.
Oh Lord, you had to, didn't you?
I had to. It was. I was going to do it anyway.
It was important for me to have the diversity in our podcast. We needed somebody in their 50s because now we've got somebody in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. So we got it covered.
True. There was another side question I was going to ask Jaime how old his parents are. We'll get to that later. But or maybe not on the show. But yeah. So here's my 2 cents thing about the book. I found the book was interesting, but it was clear it's a Chinese book that's been translated into English, and some of the paradigms don't get translated properly. There's a few times when I went, it's not quite how we would say that. But so it's an interesting story. I don't want to give too much away in case people want to wait and watch the show, especially the number one fan who always gives me trouble for wrecking things. But yeah, so the trailer looks way different than I remember the book, right? So which is kind of cool. Yeah. I mean, I remember the concepts of the book, but I guess my imagination was on Walking the Dog or something when I was listening to the audiobook. But yeah. So it looks kind of cool. What do you guys think about the trailer? Did you watch it?
Go ahead, Jaime.
Any thoughts?
I am unfamiliar with the property. Other than being aware of it existing. It's large enough that I'm aware that it exists in mainstream sci-fi circles, even if not mainstream media circles. It's kind of interesting to me as sounds like a cool idea, and I see that we'll probably talk about the Godzilla Legacy of Monsters, Monarch Legacy of Monsters stuff, but I'm burned by the final season of Game of Thrones, and I'm really will I invest in this, or will I wait to see what other people say? Is it worth it to go through? right? Because I don't really have
So this
it's
is
a movie, not a
strong
show.
connection
Is it
to
a
the
show
property.
or a movie?
It's a show, and it's Benioff and Weiss, the two showrunners
right.
for Game of Thrones. This is what they have been doing since Game of Thrones ended. So I think that's what I think, Jaime, you kind of hit the nail on the head with. I think that's what a lot of people are a little apprehensive about. Like the last thing they did was amazing, but also kind of left a sour taste in people's mouths. So I think it's kind of a question now of, well, what are we gonna get here? But then, also remember that Game of Thrones was a beloved thing for a long time too, right? So
yeah, it's not as if
hard to
they're
say.
completely unskilled hacks. Like things went off the rails from the expectations and quality that we wanted. That's true, but they also created really good, solid stuff in the years leading up to that. So that's where I'm like, I'm unsure what to do here. And Sam Tarley, I'm not sure his brother is Jack Rooney. He decided to come back and work with these guys. So there's a vote of confidence right there, right? If he was completely soured on them as a creative body, I don't know that he would necessarily go out of his way to work with them.
Yeah. On the bright side, Cixin Liu, who wrote the books, has finished the books. So there's that.
Okay.
They were like, okay, so let's get this straight. You want us to do another adaptation of a beloved book? Cool. Are you finished the books?
Yeah. But then there's also the production side of things. Like the Altered Carbon is another interesting. The first season I really liked, but I couldn't get through the second season because it's kind of like it had that Mr. Robot problem. Once you revealed the sort of secret, it's kind of hard to sort of like. But they did 3 more seasons after that, or so it's interesting to see. Like hopefully they don't wreck this property, right?
Yeah. I have high hopes. It looked really cool in the trailer. I read an interview the other day with Benedict Wong, who's the star, and he said, this is the first time I've felt like I've done something that really takes advantage of what I feel like I can do as an actor. And I was like, that's cool, because I think he's a good actor.
Yeah.
So, and I got to be honest, I like the idea of something that's a little less Amerocentric, that is a little more something else. So I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, well, we talked about a couple of those I don't know if they're Chinese, but the Earth World ones, the sci-fis that are really amazing, beautiful shows. All Asian characters and Asian represented, right? So cool. Speaking of wrecking shows, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but this is an interesting story. Charmine Obaide Chinoy, I'm gonna go with that.
Chinoy
is the director. Yeah, she's the director of female director of the next Star Wars sort of. I don't know if it's a trilogy. I think it's a trilogy. And she says in this article here that it's about time that a woman shaped Star Wars films. And what this is, and this is where my thing put a pin in it, Jonathan, was about the fact that it's going to be following up on the story of Rey, who took on the name Skywalker at the end of the last movie, which you grimace about all the time. But anyway, yeah. So, but this is carrying on the legacy. It's like 15 years later, she's trying to rebuild the Jedi Order, and I think it's cool that it's going to be. I guess you could say Force Awakens and all, and that the second. I don't know what leg of Star Wars that was. The J.J. Abrams.
So this is episode 10-ish.
Not so much, but it's sort of the Rey story, right? So I to be honest with you, like I gotta say the fact that Rey took on the name Skywalker was at the end of the movie was I kind of went ugh, groan, but it is what it is. So now she's Rey Skywalker, and so we're gonna have more of the Skywalker trilogy ish in 10 parts, right? Yeah, thanks Douglas Adams. But yeah, so we'll see where they go with that.
Yeah, a lot of this article and where I saw this in the media, news media, sort of picked up on the Star Wars shaped by a woman's perspective. Like, I would point out to folks that what we know and love of the original trilogy was heavily shaped by Marcia Lucas, right? George Lucas's wife. Her editing skill to take the raw material that would have been garbage had they gone with the original cut. The first cut to what we ultimately know now, right? And I'm not familiar with this director's work other than Miss Marvel, But I also think that it's pretty easy to get a little too cute with like, oh, well, like this is like the star director. You go with the star director. It's like, I think J.J. Abrams did fine in Force Awakens, and I think the less said about Rise of Skywalker, the better. So going with somebody who you think can provide a new, fresh perspective, so that it isn't the same old, and expand upon these things. I enjoyed Ms. Marvel. I don't expect it to be a Ms. Marvel-like experience in Star Wars. It's a very different thing. But seeing new voices come and bringing back a feminine touch rather than bringing it for the first time is probably the one thing I would say here. That like, let's not forget our history, where we came from on this.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I'm all in favor of letting other people take swings.
Yeah.
So yep, let's go.
Cool. Well, it's a famous thing in comic lore or graphic novel lore is other people taking on the character and doing their spin on it, either inking it or writing the stories, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, people can tell you of all their favorite arcs that they've had, who was the writer and who was the artist. It doesn't have to be the person who created it. It can be, 10 years later, it could be 20 years later, it could be 30 years later, completely different. And you'll get people who hate it and you'll get people who love it. And, it's why they have ketchup and mustard.
Yes, that's true. And relish. Don't forget relish. All right. So we're calling this the main part of the show, which is where we are now. And, but we're going to sort of diverge from our regular content because we don't have any of our regular content this time around. We're going to talk about the 4.5 Doctor Who, or I guess it was 4 parts, right? The specials, the
4 parts.
Christmas,
yeah.
The Christmas special. The Christmas special was the 4th episode, and so this was the carrying on of when the Jodie Whittaker Doctor transmogrified, or I forget what the actual word is, but became, instead of Chidi, how do you say his name again? Ncuti
Gatwa.
Instead of becoming Ncuti Gatwa, it became David Tennant, which was a bit of a surprise, even to David Tennant. Well, maybe not the real David Tennant, but the Doctor played by David Tennant. So he's actually the 10th and 14th Doctor, I think, right?
That's what he is. Yep.
Yeah. So, and we ended up having, 3 somewhat separate but kind of together stories, and they at the climax of the spoilers if you haven't seen it, but climax of the 3rd episode, he then transmogrifies, or splits actually into
regenerates. I think is what they go
regenerates.
with.
That's the word I'm thinking of. Yeah. I like the Calvin and Hobbes one better.
Yeah,
but so regenerates into, and it actually split, and it's kind of a unique situation where you ended up with 2 TARDISes and 2 Doctors. Mm-hmm. Don't know where they're going to go with that, but so. Interesting shows. I'm just kind of curious what you guys thought about the shows. I thought they were quite well done from a technology point of view. They brought back a lot of older characters from some of the parts of some of the what do you call the companions. They were from. I mean, Donna Noble's obviously one of the most famous companions, but
that's New Who too, right?
Yeah, but I mean, of the companions, well, Billie Piper was sort of the first one, and then Donna Noble, played by Catherine Tate, was the runaway bride for half a season or something like that, and then we ended up with, I mean, some really good companions. I've really liked the companions that they've had up until I preferred Jodie Whittaker as a Doctor, actually, but some like Capaldi's companions were interesting, and of course, we had what's her name? I'm drawing a blank on now.
Karen Gillan?
No, the other one. The one that ended up in the TARDIS, became the TARDIS. In the restaurant, black hair.
I'm trying to remember her name.
Follow her on Twitter. I can't remember her name. Hang on one sec. We have an app for that. It's called IMDb. Doctor Who. Who Doctor? Doctor Who. Jenna Coleman. That's Clara.
Oh, Clara. Yeah,
Clara. Yeah. So an interesting thing about the fact that she's wearing an apron at the in the restaurant is that episode. I don't know if you saw that, if you've ever seen that episode, but there was some speculation that she was actually the TARDIS.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, as a like transformed into a human being, right, sort of thing. Okay. yeah, so that was my really enjoyable 4 episodes. I mean, the last episode or the second last episode with that American guy
Neil Patrick Harris,
Doogie Howard, NPH was quite good in it. He playing the
dance number. We have to talk about the dance number.
Okay, let's talk about the dance number. Yeah.
Oh my God, that was so much fun doing the Spice Girls and like running around and like turning people into, using his magic to turn people into, sparkles and glitter was it was the campiest, funniest thing they've done in ages.
Yeah, the thing I had noted in our Slack channel at the time I saw the episode, not specific to the dance number, was, it's very interesting that in this very British show, the toy maker villain uses a German accent and an American accent for villainy.
Well, and the German accent was supposed to be a take because I guess this was a character that was in original Who, right? Villain.
Yeah.
Way back when. And they do, I will say I was not an old school Who fan. I really didn't come to it until New Who, but I did have an awareness, being a sci-fi kid growing up and stuff. You certainly did, watch bits of it and stuff. I know, Tim, you did too. I know that doing some reading about the specials and stuff like that, like this was this whole sort of 3 episode anniversary arc plus the Christmas special, all were like these little love letters to all the years of Who we've had, 60 years of Who, where, they were referencing things that were 50, 60 years old. They were referencing characters. They brought back so many, as you say, Tim, companions. There was a whole bunch of Doctor Who's former companions, and they all got like some decent play in those specials too. And then, we saw in the second special, we saw Bernard Cribbins playing Wilf. And he was one of the companions way back when. And he died just after filming. So like the last thing he did was get back on Doctor Who one more time. And that was really sweet. And, it's nice that it's not just, we live in the now. I was particularly struck by it because it didn't occur to me until when we got the news that we were going to get Doctor Who moving to Disney Plus. I thought, okay, cool. Disney Plus will be the new home for Doctor Who. But they said they're treating the next season, or like starting with the 60th anniversary specials and into this Christmas special and into the next season, they're treating this as a brand new iteration of Who. So they're not at this point planning to put the previous stuff up on Disney Plus. It is kind of a new beginning, which is a little sad. And I was a little miffed by that. But then it was it did have a kind of a new beginning kind of feel to it, especially because they did the what did they call it? Bi-generation. The bi-generation. That's something we have to talk about, is the bi-generation, where
regeneration.
Yeah, because in the third special with the toy maker, the culmination is that David Tennant's 10th/14th Doctor gets blasted with this gigantic laser and is about to die. And the question is, well, okay, you just died as Jodie Whittaker and came back as the 10th/14th Doctor. What now? And then it turns out that actually the Doctor splits into one version of the old Doctor and then one that's the new Doctor. So we have the 15th Doctor plus the still existing 10th/14th Doctor, so that again they can kind of give him a happy ending, as it were. But this is all really muddled, like this, especially
which one marries River Song then? I'm lost here.
And also, like, didn't they just do this in like season 4 of New Who, where like David Tennant, Jaime, I know you haven't watched all of it, but at one point they already did like a split because he creates a duplicate of himself so that version can stay with Rose, right? So I like Doctor Who, but stuff like this is why I think it turns a lot of people off. It's a little impenetrable. It's a little impenetrable, and they kind of just make it up as they go. And that's kind of the fun of it, because you never really know what they can do next. It can be a horror, it can be a comedy. You can have, Spice Girls dance numbers, and you can have, the evil monsters that get you in the dark. But it's a little bit hard to follow. Like, Jaime, I'm most curious about your thoughts on this, because you are the newest Who fan. Like, Did all this make sense to you? Or were you just like, well, I'm along for the ride, and hey, look, MPH is here?
I was probably helped a lot by Tim providing like a 15-minute, here's what you need to know to go into the holiday specials kind of recap of you mentioned the splitting of the Doctor. Didn't that leave like a hand behind that gave the Doctor back his hand? Something like that. I can't remember what the recap. It was something bananas. But I feel like that was sufficient for me to understand and more or less go along. I'm sure it was enhanced understanding for folks who actually have followed the lore. But I felt like I followed along fine. I think they did a good enough job. I was like, okay, yeah, I get it.
Well, that's good.
There's the in-between Doctors. I mean, I stopped watching after Peter Davidson back in the day, probably because I went to university and got married and had kids and stuff and just stopped watching it. But because there's Sylvester McCoy and there's 3 Doctors that I don't know, the last 3 before the New Who, right? I know them by seeing them, right? But I don't know anything about them. I don't know. And some of the companions that were in the Christmas specials were from that generation, right?
Yeah.
And even the lady that was in the 4th episode or the 4th special, she has some history. I forget what her connection is, but because I was curious as to why she knew the Doctor and she knew the TARDIS, right?
Yep.
Yeah, you're right. It does get a bit muddled, but I think it's kind of like, but then again, I'm not really British anymore. I'm now Canadian, right? But how we feel about Worf and Riker and and Morn and Quark coming back into the Star Trek universes. This is how it feels. It must feel for people who, even like you said, even dragging out the Spice Girls, tell you what I want, what I really, really want kind of bit, that's that's an interesting point of view from their perspective to have these people come back and have you recognize, So I'm sure there's many generations of families that watch Doctor Who, right? Who've been watching it since the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and now the New Who since the 90s, right? And by the way, I just wanted to put a note on. I've gone back and I've started watching I think I'm watching it on Prime. It's either Prime or Crave. One of the two of them has all the Doctor Who's. And I know that Tubi, the Tubi app, has a lot of the really old Doctor Who's, like the Tom Baker, the 70s stuff, right? And they kind of show them in succession, and they kind of just rattle through them. So you can get your Who fix if you really want to go back and watch that stuff. But Doctor Who was never famous for their amazing special effects back in the day. A lot of times it was just playing with videotape and stuff, right?
Yeah. For me, so the 3, the Star Beast, Wild Blue Yonder, and the Giggle. As somebody who's new to the Whoverse, the Star Beast, I think, is the closest equivalent to being like a Lower Decks kind of thing of like, you really want to know the lore to get all of the details. That was the one that felt like I needed the 15-minute recap YouTube thing that Tim sent the most. The second one was kind of the most standalone. It kind of was more The Outer Limits or the Twilight Zone-esque kind of a feel to it. And then the Giggle, needed to bring the new Doctor along. So I think it fit quite well in that scheme. I'm a little cynical on why they decided to do by generation this time.
I think we all are.
I mean, for one, like I will say that like it's really clear that like this Disney money is like coming through, and like the production values are just astounding. But I also feel like Disney, and I have no proof of this, just to be really clear. I also feel like Disney wanted it didn't go so great when we had a non-white male Doctor before. I need you to give me an option just in case, those fans don't like this other non-white male Doctor, so that, don't worry, kiddos, the quote-unquote real Doctor is still out there. We can always move back to Tennant by just throwing a big pile of money in his face. Like, I'm cynical that that's why they did it. But as a relative outsider to Who, I'm like, yeah, when I think of Doctor Who, this is David Tennant's face is who I see in my head.
Yeah,
I don't have that history.
I agree with you, Jaime. Unfortunately, I did think to myself as I was watching this, oh God, are they going to do like 2 concurrent Who shows or a series of Who specials focusing on, David Tennant as the completely different Doctor? Again, in a show that is timey-wimey, that is muddled by, let's just politely call it really messy continuity. I just don't know how good that is. Although, as I say, there's kind of this divorce, right? Like now you got to have like another app or BritBox or something different if you want to watch the other stuff. So I guess what they're thinking is, well, this is the home of what we now call Doctor Who, and we can do whatever we want here forward. And so, if you're an old school Who fan and you don't like it, that other stuff somewhere else, and it's not our problem. But I don't know. I can't say I love it.
The showrunner's come back. I've forgotten his name, but he's the reason why. Yeah, he's the one that's brought back. He's one of the. I think he was from the Tennant era.
Yep.
But one of the things about Doctor Who and the Whovians can yell at the screen if all they like. But one thing I remember about it is that they would have these Christmas specials which were completely off book, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's the 5 Doctors is another famous one where they actually brought back 5 different Doctors to meet on this planet and solve a problem, right? Mm-hmm. Tom Baker, John Pertwee, and a couple of other doctors were there. I can't remember if Davidson was there in that one, but and that was, and then there's like there's Peter Cushing played the Doctor in a special, and then of course we had John Hurt play the War Doctor, right? So there have been in the past different, like it's kind of like and I guess you call it canon, but they kind of take the, like, sometimes you get like the Star Wars books, you get like a book that's just about a particular character in the universe at some point in between, the Emperor, or between, I guess, Andor now and Rey's story, right? Rey Days, I guess we'll call it. You just randomly have somebody take on a character and write a story about it. Well, the Doctor Who's kind of sort of done that too, and it's arguable whether they fit in. And I think the thing about Doctor Who, because he's a Time Lord, he can cross over and you can have 2 Doctors at the same time. They've done that many times in the past, right?
Yep.
So it's kind of that's the whole timey-wiminess of it, right?
I'm worried in the same way Jaime is. I'm worried it's a cop-out because not everybody will like having a Black Scottish Doctor.
Yeah, like my take, Tim, is that like, after a season or 2, it's like the execs are sitting in a room, they're like, we paid a bunch of money for this thing. It's not getting the numbers we want. Hey, guess what, writers? There's an ungeneration where the Black Doctor has to merge back into the good old white man, David Tennant. And now the quote unquote real Doctor is at full power. Like again, I'm cynical. I hope they don't, hit that, break that emergency glass for very cynical reasons. But I feel like the way that they did it was intended to give them this out.
Yeah, I must say.
Go ahead.
I must say though, I was a fan of Ncuti Gatwa from his work on the show Sex Education on Netflix, so I had multiple years of familiarity with him. But I think he's a great Doctor. He's fun. He's got this great energy. He's a different take than the previous several Doctors, and that's what I want when we're going to get a new Doctor. I want something that's different and new and interesting, and I think there's some cool stories to tell. I'm a little worried about the first episode where he goes back in time and they're like, escaped slave. Like, that's not going to be good, but like say what you will, but like even the woman Doctor had some problems going into the past about, the agency that a woman had. Like, this is starting to get dark.
Yeah, that's true.
But at the same time, like, I think he himself is really interesting as a performer. And I think it could make for something really, really special if they kind of lean into it. Right.
But, I think the conceit that they have is the Doctors are always carrying that wallet, with the ID that he flips over, and it's always a blank piece of paper. And the person he shows it to always sees what he tells them it says.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Like, here's my FBI credentials or whatever, right? I mean, that may be a way that's always sort of been something that the Doctor's had as well as his sonic screwdriver to basically...
you mean his BlackBerry? That's sure as hell what it looked like when he had his sonic screwdriver in that last episode.
Yeah, with BlackBerry, and then there's like some of them. Sometimes Jodie Foster's look like a little claymation spoon or something. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, weird.
And Capaldi had a Fender Stratocaster sonic screwdriver at one point. Right?
It's true. Didn't he have sunglasses at some point?
Yeah.
He had sonic sunglasses, I think, at one point.
Yes, that's true. Yes, he did. Yeah.
So speaking of the new Doctor's adventures, what about the church on Ruby Road? What do you all think as longtime Who fans?
It opens up. I really like the new companion. I thought she was charming.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of potential there, but obviously they've set up this next sort of big Doctor Who mystery. Who was her mom? How did she get left there? What kind of insanely cruel person leaves a baby in snow? But I think I enjoyed the episode. I thought, the stuff with the flying pirate ship, and it was a little far fetched. But so was Doctor Who as a principle. But learning the language of string was a fun one. I enjoyed the episode very much, but it kind of felt a little bit like they were setting things up a little too hard. Like it wasn't just a fun Christmas special. It felt like it was the whole, like, here we go, more Doctor Who. Like it and I guess that's what it was for. But yeah, to me, it just felt like a little too much. Like it was the Age of Ultron problem, right? You're trying to set things up, and you do that, and you don't spend enough time telling the story that you should be telling.
Yeah. I like Millie Gibson as well, but she's a very much like a Rose Tyler, right? So
yep.
So it's kind of that sort of.
And there's this whole mystery of where she came from, and who her mom is, and
Well, they did that with the Alex Kingston character.
Yeah, it's the whole
song, right?
Absolutely, it's the whole River Song thing. That's which again, maybe for a whole new audience, it's unfamiliar territory. Maybe they'll go somewhere that we're not expecting with it. But that was just, it felt a little familiar. So yeah, we'll see where it goes. But I think she's charming. I think he's charming. I think their chemistry was great. Like the parts where they were on the ship and they're like crawling around and their banter. Like I think they're going to be a really fun pair to go on adventures with.
Yeah. Yeah, and the section characters are coming back. The Redgrave coming back, Gemma Redgrave coming back. That's an interesting thing because they had that goes back to the 70s Doctor Who as well, right?
Yep.
It's sort of like the secret MI12 or whatever you call it, like the secret agency, police security thing that Britain has, that they know the Doctor and they're the keepers of the secrets. That's where the Ark is, by the way. The warehouse where the Ark is stored.
I liked it at one point when the woman, I can't remember if they actually said the character's name, the agent who was in a wheelchair. She says, "I'm Agent blah blah blah," and he's like, "Cool, I'm Agent number 0001." It's like, yep, there it is. Like, yeah, it gives you an idea of kind of the history you're dealing with this show. Like, yep, there's always a backstory because there's always a backstory.
Now, a word from our sponsor. Now, back to the show.
Cool. Well, what if they mixed up the characters? What if they mixed them all up?
Yes. What if they changed their origins lately? So let's talk about What If Season 2. We won't get too into it because Tim's still just not quite finished.
Oh, don't worry about spoiling me. I'll be fine. I'll watch it.
All right. We're going to talk openly about it, so get ready for some spoilers. So this was an interesting season in that the first season sort of had this thread that wove through the whole thing. It seemed like it was these independent little episodes, and then it sort of turned out that it was actually all tied together in this one way. And I found myself going into the season thinking, well, they've kind of told that story, and it kind of tied into the Doctor Strange movie that came out, a year and a half ago, whatever that was. I was curious as to whether this was going to be a bunch of self-contained episodes or if this was going to be something sort of more grand. And the answer is yes. It was kind of all of those things, wasn't it?
Yep.
There was definitely some better episodes than, mixed in with some not as great ones. some cool moments, some characters that we haven't had a chance to spend time with. For me, I thought a couple of the highlights, I thought the What If Happy Hogan Saved Christmas episode that came out at Christmas time, it came out on the 24th. That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the What If Iron Man crashed into the Grandmaster, the one where they do the Death Race 3000 on Sakaar. That was a lot of fun. I really did enjoy that one, Tim, we were talking about earlier with Kahori, the Haudenosaunee woman who gets the power of one of the gems from the Tesseract and becomes this sort of super heroic person in the 15th century, a young, Mohawk woman who's got this, sort of supreme power and starts to defend her peoples. Although that one, I found myself just really stretching my brain because at one point I thought, God, this is beautiful. They did the whole thing in the language of the Haudenosaunee people and it was subtitled. And I'm like, God, that's really beautiful. You get to hear this language that's so unspoken, in contemporary pop culture. But then they had them fighting conquistadors. And I was like, I don't know all about the history of the indigenous people here in North America, but I don't remember at any point the Spaniards encountering the Haudenosaunee, because the Haudenosaunee are more up here and the Spanish were more the south. So that really took me out of it. But all that being said, I thought it was a great episode. She was a cool character. And then they bring it back around where she sort of returns later on in the series. But the thread that weaves through the whole thing is that, that the villain from season 1 turns out to be the villain from season 2. And that felt a little derivative, repetitive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not in an absolutely terrible way, but when Doctor Strange Supreme shows up sort of a few episodes earlier, you're like, oh, this guy. And then he's like, no, I've turned good. And you're like, no. And then, curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal. It just, it all felt a little bit, just a little bit formulaic. I don't know, just a little disappointing that that's the route that they took. That being said, animation was gorgeous. I love that they get as many of the actual stars to do their voices as possible. Mm-hmm. Haley Atwell, Benedict Cumberbatch, Cate Blanchett. We got so many cool voice performances. Again, we did get we got Elizabeth Olsen back as Wanda, right? Chris Hemsworth, Tom Hiddleston, Mark Ruffalo. The only ones we really didn't get were Evans and
Lake Bell or whatever.
Robert Downey, right? That was really the only two people who didn't do their own voices.
No, and the Black Widow was Lake Bell again.
Oh, that's right. Black Widow was Lake Bell. You're right. Yeah. But overall, pretty decent turnout. So, and I think that really adds something to the show. It feels like you're still with those same characters. So I thought overall it was a solid B- season. But I'm curious to see if you have different takes.
And it's funny, I kind of watched them as what if individual scenarios, the Iron Man doesn't die kind of thing, right? But I'd forgotten about the through story that was in the first season. And since I'm only halfway through, I guess really can't say much more than that. So, what do you think?
For me, I think one of the things that I didn't enjoy as much, although I do think they've got some good episodes, is it just has a little too much emphasis on Captain Carter. It's one thing to have and I guess having Strange Supreme return was also kind of with What If, you can do sort of whatever you want. Did you really have to spend a lot of time on Captain Carter and Strange Supreme when you can do wackier stuff like the Grandmaster bit or things that I've never heard of before but really enjoyed, like Kahori's character and the whole Mohawk Nation approach to things, or even just weirdo things that combine, here's some things we've seen before. What if Thor isn't around and you've got Hela in that era, and having an enchantment on her favorite weapon and stuff. Like, and bring in the 10 rings in. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. You're mixing things I hadn't really considered. I'd like them to see more of that. Like, they can have a through line if they want, but it doesn't have to be as strong, because in that case, it's like, why don't you just make a Captain Carter series then? Just go all in on it then.
Yeah, you're right, Jaime. It almost felt like they went away from the what if Marvel universe and kind of told a what if the first season, expanded, right? Like, that's kind of what the what if was this time. What if we wanted to make a sequel to this series and had Jeffrey Wright narrate it? Yeah, I think, like I say, I think there was lots of good things to take away from it. It just didn't feel as inventive as the first season to me. It was kind of more like a greatest hits again. Hey, it's Doctor Strange Supreme. Hey, it's Captain Carter. Hey, Marvel zombies are back. Hey, at one point we'll basically unleash all the same villains as, so it's just like, okay, here we go again. So yeah, I don't know. In a world where I struggle just because I've read a lot of the concepts that they're turning into these things, it was like, come on, man, tell me something different.
Cool. How about that Echo?
Yeah, let's talk about Echo. Jaime, what did you think of Echo?
I enjoyed the series a lot. I wonder if it benefits from being dropped as 5 episodes that I watched over a couple nights. I have some quibbles with how they wrap up some things, so I don't think it quite sticks the landing for me. I give it probably like a solid B-. I do really appreciate the fact that while we've gone into wilder and weirder things in the MCU, kind of like the fact that this one brought it sort of back to basics and made it a lot more grounded and approachable, but for the most part. Also appreciated the Choctaw Nation approach to things. It's very different as a show. Like, this is not a show that you can sort of have casually in the background and be even eating, because, like, spoilers, the main character has a problem hearing, and there's a lot of intentional, they're signing to each other, so you have to read the subtitles, which I always have subtitles on, so it's not a big deal for me, but it's like, oh, normally I use the subtitles to gain, like, what was the word they say? Oh, okay, got it, while I'm like eating a sandwich, soup or something. And there's an intentional audio choices where, like, sometimes you sort of hear from her perspective where, like, there should be crashes and clangs, but it's like absolute silence, the way that the main character would experience. So I'm like, oh, this is a show like you have to be focused, and they're pretty bingeable. It's kind of weird that each episode sort of gets shorter as it goes along in the series instead of longer. So if you can spare the almost an hour, by the end you're like barely over half an hour. So pretty easy. And I think that some of the fight sequences were just like, holy smokes, that's like an incredibly inventive way to fight and to use some things against the quote unquote able-bodied people, use stuff against them, and how the ability to hear can sometimes be a disadvantage. Like, that's all really cool stuff. Really, really enjoyed that stuff. Wasn't quite as much of a fan of the way it ends, because in my mind, I have somebody who said, if people go back in the audio logs of this very show for WandaVision, that although I did appreciate the actress for Agatha Harkness, I kind of wanted Grief to be the villain. Like, I thought Grief was the villain of that series. I didn't think it needed you're a witch, so now there's another witch, a bad witch for you to fight sort of MCU problem. I wanted, like, no, this is just straight up Grief as the problem. And I think Grief as the problem in WandaVision probably makes Multiverse of Madness better, in my opinion, as a like through line. In this one, I said, what is the villain? I'm like, family is the villain. Right? So your blood family, the bad old Lopez boys, as put in the first episode, and then your adopted family in Fisk, the Kingpin, and then family at the end. Family, like alcohol, could be the problem and the solution, right? Like, I wanted that to be the thing. The mysticism stuff was like, I kind of didn't really need the mysticism as a cop-out. I appreciated it as a historical, cultural background aspect, but I feel like it just didn't mesh for the ending for me because of that. Like, I really wanted, like, family is the problem, family is going to be the villain all the way through.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I found that it was hard to get to the motivations of it, and it's an awful thing, because I was really excited at the fact that, you know, like, casting Alika Cox is such an interesting decision. It was for Hawkeye, it is for this. Casting a woman who is hearing impaired and does have a physical disability, and that she only has one physical leg. And then, you know, casting her in this and having her be the lead character is amazing. It's such a huge and important thing to do. And the fact that she's also Choctaw. Like, these are all things that we should strive towards. But I'm not sure it made for the best show. And I hate that I'm thinking that, but I did find myself thinking that. I found myself thinking some of the dramatic scenes where all we're getting is her facial emotions, it felt at times limiting. I found that at times, you know, the fact that they were having these, what in a dramatic series would have been, you know, a very intense dialogue in Sign, did kind of lessen the dramatic impact for me. And that was not what I was expecting. And I found myself sort of thinking, well, you know, was this the best way to tell a story, to put her in these situations where she is having to have these, like, you know, intense emotional showdowns when she's talking with Fisk, when she's talking with her grandma, like when she's talking with her cousin and stuff like that. I was like, it doesn't feel like they're really doing her a lot of favors as an actress to put her in these situations where she's not playing to her strengths. And so, yeah, I found myself sort of wanting a little bit in those moments. And it also meant that Alika Cox was essentially acting off of Vincent D'Onofrio. Now, Vincent D'Onofrio is an incredible actor. He stole this thing again, as he does in everything. He stole Hawkeye. He stole the Daredevil series. He's incredible. I think his Kingpin characters might be my all-time favorite Marvel villain that they've done in the MCU. It's so consistent. He is so the same character. His motivations, the way that he views things, is so consistent, and I love it. But it felt like it was his show at a point, and I don't like that. I don't think that's fair to her as an actor, and I don't think it's fair to Echo as a character. So it was a little bit conflicting for me, where I was enjoying the series, but I didn't think it was taking the best advantage of who she is as a performer. And I don't think they put her in the best position as a character to become a character that people are going to love, because it just felt like there wasn't enough of an ability to connect with her on an emotional level. Yeah, as that being said, you know, I agree with you. I think it was probably, you know, I mean, you're right. The fight scenes were incredible. I loved the stuff they did when they were telling the history of the Choctaw people and actually getting to see, you know, some of the stuff of her ancestors and that. I did agree with you very much, Jaime, that she suddenly has, you know, powers given to her by, you know, her connection to these people that allow her in the end to basically win the fight a little bit much. But yeah, the fight scenes were great. That the scene in the roller rink, that whole episode in the roller rink was terrific. There's a lot to like about this show, but I just don't know that it landed the way that I was hoping it would. I do completely agree with you, Jaime, though. This is the first time Disney Plus has done a drop of episodes versus week to week. I don't think this works as well if you have to wait around 5 weeks for it.
Yeah. I think the synthesis of your feelings on this and mine work, where I liked this show better. Again, I already stated, like, I want family to be the villain, because that's kind of what I was getting out of it from the most of the episodes. And having Echo, I mean, she's not like a villain per se. She's like an anti-hero, right? She's like a Spawn or a Venom, not in the mystical superpower sort of sense, but just like they're not really good people like Superman and Wonder Woman, right? So I kind of prefer this as like a show where family's the villain, and this is Choctaw John Wick, right? Like the action stuff was like incredibly good. I'm like, yeah, for like an assassin thief sort of villain person, I'm like, that works really well. Like, I thought that part worked really, really well. I don't expect John Wick to go into like super emotional stuff because I'm there for like, the fight scenes and the action scenes.
Tell me a great revenge story. Tell me a great revenge story. I have no problem with that. Don't feel like you need to go to another level. And it felt like that's where it fell off the rails.
The one through story for me was like a reunion of all the actors from Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah. Or Reservation Dogs, yeah.
Reservation Dogs, yeah. I don't know if you've guys seen that, but like just about every actor that was in it, except for the grandmother, is from that show. Oh, and her sort of the bowling alley guy. I want to say the roller rink guy.
Her uncle, yeah,
her uncle. He's not from there, but her dad was. He plays this sort of bumbling cop. The Don Knotts kind of character. Yeah. Have you guys watched any of that stuff?
It's been on my to-do list for ages, and now that it's over, especially now that it's sort of a contained amount, it's definitely on my to-do list because I do. I love stories about Indigenous peoples. I love learning about that culture, and that's like way up there. One thing I did want to shout out: Graham Greene, Canadian icon,
Canada's own.
Well, he's so good.
Turtle Island's own, yeah.
Turtle Island's own, yeah. He's just so good. He's so good. I have never seen a bad Graham Greene performance, and he just steals it as her, grandfather running the old junk shop, flirting with his old ex-wife. Like, he's just so charming. He's just so likable. I love that guy.
Yeah, good casting here. The grandmother also played a very strong matronly kind of character in the Portlandia TV show, which involved a lot of Native American tribes characters. And I'm conflicted by the casting here. And to be really clear, like I love the casting that they did here. I love the representation, and I'm always going to push for actors to get good work. Where I'm a little concerned is I see these patterns where it's like, they literally hired all of the available Native American actors and actresses. Yeah. Like apparently these 20 are like the only ones that exist. And for every film for the next decade and TV series, these are the only ones you're going to see. I guarantee you there are many other Native actors who should get chances and roles as well. And we've seen this happen with every decade there's like 10 Asian actors and actresses
blacks,
you can hire.
Latinos, it's
come on, man. Like, if you're not going to have the same 10 white people doing all the roles, you can't have the same 10 choose a race or other aspect people. Like, broaden things a bit. Again, nothing to these actors, and I really do love their work. I don't need to see this person again in a matronly role. I don't need to see that dude again as like the brother or the dad or whatever, right? Like, I want to see other people too. See other people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fair point. That's an absolutely fair point. Yeah, I mean, interesting. I liked that they did this as the sort of Marvel Spotlight branding. This was the first series we'd have gotten with that branding in it. I'm curious to see what they do with that. If this was something they created uniquely to sort of say, hey, this is, it almost felt like what they were saying was, you don't have to watch this if you don't want to,
right.
Other than the PS piece at the end of the final episode, the little coda at the end where Fisk is watching TV and they start talking about the mayoral race, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you guys watch that?
Yeah.
So, that's the only thing that connects this really to the larger narrative that the MCU is going to involve here. That, Fisk as mayor is a story they did in the comics. Fisk as mayor, especially when they're doing a new Daredevil series and they're doing a new Punisher series, and that they're going to do Jessica Jones and Luke Cage and all those characters, those street level characters are coming back, setting Kingpin up as the big bad of New York City as the mayor, is a big and important step. But you could just as easily drop that in the first couple minutes of whatever next series is, whether it's Daredevil or whatever else, and carry on your merry way. You could skip this entire series as a Marvel fan, and yeah, you'd be the worse off for it. It was a good series. It wasn't a great series, it was a good series. But, I wonder if we'll see a little more of that minor detachment from some of the stuff going forward, where you don't have to.
All right. Well, I guess that's it for another week. So, Jonathan, people are in touch with you. Where would they find you?
You can find me on Twitter or X, and on Instagram as @JPK News, or you can find me on YouTube at youtube.com/@JPK.
And Jaime, people want in touch with you. Where do they find you?
I'm on Twitter as @DevOfTheHair.
All right. And as ever, my name is Timitra, Timmitra. On the Twitter machine and the Mastodon machine and all the places, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram. So until next time, we'll see you in the future. Bye.
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 You've been listening to the Spotcast podcast. If you want to find out more about the podcast or see the episode show notes, visit the Spotcast website at spotcast.com. You can get in touch with us on the website or follow us on Twitter at Spotcast. If you have feedback or questions, send us a tweet with the hashtag AskSpotcast. If you like the show, please consider recommending us to a friend, writing a review on iTunes, or pledging any amount at patreon.com/Spotcast. You can find details on how to help us on our website, spotcast.com/sponsor us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the future.